Big question here on the 2nd of July, 2025. My name's Robert. He's Jason. In light of Bernadeschi and Insigne, two very high-priced and high-profile signings for Toronto FC. They've since been released from or bought out of their contracts this week. We can dip into that a little bit, but I wanted to give MK to have their say of the worst signings in your club history. We've got a couple already lining up in the mix. I don't know what that word is. What is Mike saying there on the screen?
He's saying Risenboli, goalkeeper, Philadelphia Union, saying it's their worst signing is what Mike is. He was getting ahead of the curve. There he is with Risenboli. I remember the Risenboli era, but I don't remember exactly how much they spent on him or what the whole story of that was, but he definitely did not work out in Philadelphia. He did not work out. So, this is that thing, and a goalkeeper too. Like just don't whiff on a goalkeeper. There's really no excuse for that, Rob. You goalkeepers are around. You can get a decent one. And I also don't think that I don't remember if Risenboli was a DP, but certainly we have had DP goalkeepers in Major League Soccer. Never a great idea, even if they perform relatively well. But this story with Insigne and Bernadeschi terminating their contracts with Toronto and moving on, Toronto FC might get slightly worse in the short term because at least they're high talent players, even if they didn't bring it to the level they needed to make those contracts worth it. The thing I would say about Toronto and those signings is that Toronto is the extreme example alongside, say, I guess Inter Miami. And I guess you could put maybe the Galaxy in the same category of clubs who chase the high of getting international recognition for the signings that they make in the DP realm, right?
Expensive heat.
It's not cheap heat. It is rich heat. It's Zlatan Ibrahimovic. It is obviously Lionel Messi, Sergio Busquets. It is in this case. And, Toronto did make it work when they went and made some high profile signings in a previous era. Of course, two of those signings that kind of led them to titles were American players who were returning to the United States after stints abroad and did not really rank among, these weren't Champions League caliber players in Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore. And obviously Sebastian Giovinco was a guy who had been with Champions League caliber clubs, but never been able to get on the field very much. Mm-hmm. So when they did that, they found the right recipe. But obviously the upshot here is that neither Insigne nor Bernadeschi, when you pay them that much money and you don't fill out the rest of the team, that's not enough, right? It's not just sign a couple of big name DPs. You've got to have the supporting cast. Those TFC teams under Greg Vanney back when they were winning titles were noted for their depth. By MLS standards, very good depth. Obviously, worldwide standards, it might be different. And what this got me thinking about, and a thing that I want to write up for my newsletter, Jason Davis Soccer Eagle, go find it, is MLS chasing that cheap heat, but it's not cheap, it's expensive. And I equated it to this because somebody said on Blue Sky, Parker Smith, a guy I follow on Blue Sky, said something like, this is part of the problem, right? That MLS, that its teams chase this big name thing. And then what is that issue is that you see this and go, well, the league's moving forward. This is progress for MLS because they gave Lorenzo Insigne $15 million a year. But that doesn't do enough down the roster. I mean, it doesn't do anything down the roster. And you're spending so much of your budget. And I don't mean in like MLS rule budget. I mean, whatever you were willing to spend on your soccer team, if you're MLSE, the owners of Toronto FC. Now, so much of it, in the case of Insigne and Bernadeschi, over $21 million is going to two players. And even if you're willing to spend almost $40 million as they were, that's more than half. That's 60% of your money is going to two players. And you don't have the quality throughout the team to make those two players effective when they are on the field. Maybe their attitude stunk. Maybe there's a lot of other things going on behind the scenes. Maybe they didn't really like each other. Maybe Bernadeschi was vaping in the locker room. Whatever it was, that didn't make it work. Part of it was the inability to spend across their roster. And so MLS, the way I said it is, MLS loves the smell of its own farts. These are. That's what this is. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I mean it's a funny way to put it, but I see your point there, and that's very valid. And yeah, I think Toronto got this wrong on just so many levels. Like obviously, they spent big on two players. Those two players didn't necessarily, at least Insigne. Like I'm no a body language expert, but Insigne had some of the worst player body language I've ever seen from any player. Really, when I've watched Toronto this year, pretty terrible. But and to your point, is their depth? They didn't really have any around it. When you think of teams that had successful DPS like the early Atlantas, their role players were huge for them. It
Yeah.
wasn't just the big money guys that contributed to that team being great. And I think, so we're going to go to the comments of some of the MK Ultras, and the commenters' suggestions for their clubs were suggestions. And I think the first one I'm going to bring up here is to the point of spending big on one or two players and almost forgetting about everyone else around, and kind of capsizing kind of the rest of the project. Is Xherdan Shaqiri to the Chicago Fire, I think, is the
Yeah.
perfect example of getting a player that could probably put you over the edge. Like if you had a solid team and then you added him, you could go from like a good to a really, really good team. But if you're the dregs of a league that's an emerging league, and you add a player who really, to be honest, was a bit part player at Liverpool before that anyway, and instead of add a bit part player to a team who didn't have any sort of a core at all,
Yeah.
was just a bad idea in general.
No, absolutely. The Xherdan Shaqiri one stands out. It did feel. I mean, a lot of this, of course, is analysis after the fact, like in retrospect. Oh, at the time, I don't know
That
that
seemed
anybody was.
that
I
seemed
don't know
like a
anybody was
terrible idea from the start to me.
that's fair, right? And it felt again so there is the allegation here from Riverside Grove. MLS has always emphasized marketing over product. It's where so much of the disdain for MLS comes from. That I don't. I think in sort of a simple way of saying that's a fair statement that MLS has prioritized marketing. Now, I'm sure that people at MLS would argue, well, marketing is critical to getting the money in to help us improve the product, right? Like the idea of let's just make good soccer and the people will show up is a tougher sell in America than it might be in a lot of places, because you're not in America. You're not just trying to capture soccer fans who need to be convinced their team is good and worth watching. You're trying to convince people who aren't really soccer fans or are only casual fans who only know a few names that they should come out. And if you put a big name on the field, that's when they show up. And then you backfill the quality after you do that. I mean, that's the MLS approach. And it's not always effective. And again, Rob, it gets down to what your priority is. Your
Mm-hmm.
priority to play the best possible soccer. If you're 100% convinced you're going to fill up your stadium every week, kind of no matter what, you could focus on that without worrying about anything else. We don't need a marquee name. We just need the best player who fits. Now, if he happens to be a marquee name, great. If not, whatever. We move on. But again, in this league, in this country, they are hardwired from 1996 to try to chase the thing that gets them more attention, because they're not only competing worldwide for respect, they're competing within their own country for sports dollars that go to other sports that we have here.
Another suggestion in the chat. I think this one's a little harsh, but one of our cherished MK Ultras here, Kai Kamara at Minnesota United. Funnily enough, this is the one move we did a video on. Can Jason name all of Kai Kamara's MLS teams? And Minnesota United, the only one out of, I think, the 13 teams on Kai Kamara's MLS resume that he couldn't get. I mean, that was 2020. That was
Look,
COVID
that
bubble
is
stuff.
it is COVID bubble stuff, but it helps Ken's argument that I couldn't remember that Kai Kamara was at Minnesota United. No, but Kai Kamara, look, if you want to call him a bad signing, that's fair. He's not on the same level as Xherdan Shaqiri because of the money, or as both Lefty and Riverside Grove has said, Steven Gerrard at LA Galaxy rather. That was a bad one. That did not work out. Another Toronto one. I don't think you could claim Bernadeschi and Insigne trump this, but Jermaine Defoe at TFC.
Credit to
It's
Jermaine
the
Defoe.
thing.
He got out quick. He didn't waste anyone's time, years on a
That
contract, just burning up money. I mean, he was like, this isn't for me. I'm out.
And the story there, by the way, is that one of the reasons Jermaine Defoe signed with TFC is because Drake called him or called his mom or something like that.
Yeah, he,
And
he he was convinced, and he totally got duped by Drake. He was like, "Yeah, I thought I was going to be hanging out with Drake," and I literally once I signed, I never saw him or heard from him
never
again.
saw Drake is that guy. He's not going to post. He's not going to post. I think Neri Castillo is another Chicago Fire signing that did not work out. I think Neri Castillo was off of like a good Gold Cup or something, or maybe even a couple goals in a World Cup for Mexico, and he got signed to a big contract. And obviously, part of that is Chicago has a big Mexican American community. They had already been successful with Cuauhtemoc Blanco, and that Neri Castillo was in that same vibe, and he just wasn't. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't at that level. Producer Jenny has shouted us out shouted out Olivier Giroud in the private chat. Does Giroud measure up for LA?
Yeah,
I mean, Gareth Bale would have been if he doesn't score the winning goal in an MLS Cup final.
yeah.
Giroud didn't do that. Didn't cost as much as Bale did, though. I don't believe.
He did score, I think, a Leagues Cup final goal, if I recall. He scored LAFC versus Columbus. In one of the iterations, one of the Cuppity Cups he scored in. But yeah, not a great stay for Olivier Giroud. But to be fair, he was kind of a little bit set up for not to be successful with the way that they play.
I agree.
He was never necessarily a run and gun transition guy, like even in his pomp, and so he wasn't really set up for success there. Was there any
Yeah,
other ones out there?
I agree with that. I agree with that. But still, I mean, and again, I don't know how much they paid him, but he was a DP, so he's taking up that very important and precious DP spot. Let's see. I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, Marcelo Gallardo at DC United. How good or bad was that one? I'm sure DC's got a list that I'm just missing on a couple of names. I'm trying to think of maybe the worst signing in Red Bull history. I mean, I know we're just doing MLS here, but
The
let's
new
see.
striker they got, the new old man striker could be on this list here shortly.
How about Luis Angel Landin for the Houston Dynamo? That's it. You go back and look that one up. Go back and look up Luis Angel Landin in Houston. Let's see. Going through the mental. It would take me a while to kind of work through it. I know I've got some in there. Does Freddie Lumberg count, or did he do okay that he didn't measure up
I thought he
poorly?
did okay. I've never really considered him a bust. I mean, he didn't like set the world light or anything like that, but I wouldn't have considered him like an all-time fail. I know it was a much lower um profile than Shaqiri, but when I was covering the Fire, they signed a goalie from South America to big money in comparison, Jorge Bava.
Oh
Um,
wow, I do
I
not
don't
remember that name.
He was there. He was the goalie the Schweinsteiger year, and then once Schweinsteiger and some of the Dax McCarty signed, he faded away because he was just a kind of a clown car on 2 feet, and they spent money at an international spot for a goalie who couldn't catch, couldn't kick, couldn't do a lot of things.
I'm going to shout out Lefty here. He's bringing up the Red Bulls. Claudio Reyna, who was already a broken down player by the time he arrived in New York or Jersey to be a Red Bull. And that's a forgettable period. And absolutely, that's a bad signing. Although, Lefty, I think if we're talking Red Bulls, and a name that escaped me initially, Rafa Marquez. Rafa Marquez has to be the worst signing the Red Bulls have ever made in terms of the dollars, what they got for him. He was only there to maybe live in New York for a bit. He really wasn't there to commit to the soccer. He had like a thing in the playoffs against the Galaxy where he threw a ball at Landon Donovan, got suspended for like 4 games for the next season. It was a disaster for Rafa Marquez. Did not want to be there.
This one's interesting. Chicharito, Riverside Grove FC. Chicharito to LA. I mean, I know he had like a 2 week span where he kind of like had like a mini redemption arc there, but it was mostly bad, right? He was pretty run
Yeah.
down.
There, he was not, he had some mental things going on, I think, emotional things going on. I think maybe of going through a divorce or something, which is not to say that he wasn't a bad signing. Of course, that you can't like take that into account. Well, you give him a pass. No, I don't think he was, I don't think he was that bad. I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad.
No, not that bad. Well, There's been plenty to sift through, plenty of bad signings in MLS history. My last Liverpool shout for worst signing, Ricky Lambert. I that one crushed me because I knew that we replaced Luis Suarez with Ricky Lambert, and I knew that wasn't. I knew we were unserious about winning things at that point, and it's not always the
Oh,
money; it's what you're signaling with that signing that sometimes is the painful part. But to kind of wrap it up, Bernadeschi and Insigne leaving Toronto, and then piggybacking on that, the fine Frenchman gone from LAFC, Olivier Giroud. So big three name contracts off the books for Major League Soccer. And I would say you earlier on at the top you said that the departure of the Italians would lead to short term them getting worse, but probably long term better. In Detroit sports terms, I would say Miguel Cabrera, as soon as he left his like 10-year, $20 million a year contract, they suddenly became relevant again. So hopefully for TFC fans
come
that
on,
might.
but nobody is upset. Nobody hated Miggy Guerrero, right? Nobody was like mad at him. It was
No.
just
I'm not saying it's a bad signing, but it was no coincidence that finally once his contract that went on 5 years too long, once
yeah,
that was off the books, they all of a
yeah.
sudden were in
That
playoff contention again.
that's a story, right? That's something that Major League Soccer really hasn't fallen into yet. Where and really, it's not a soccer thing in general. Although I guess the way that Chelsea is structuring their contracts now, it kind of brings it into play that you're kind of you've got some dead money. You've got contracts that are just holding you down, albatross around the club because
Soccer's
MLS.
way more aware of end of deal fall off. Like so many teams are requisite to go beyond 2 years once the player's like 29 years old or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Other than Chelsea, there's no decades long deals in soccer.
No, no, not yet. We'll see if that ever happens.
Yeah, will Todd Bowley be the change maker of soccer? I mean, I know it turns some heads, but I don't know about in the right direction. But we shall see. But that should about do us for today's big question. MK had their say. Thank you so much for everyone getting their suggestions in. A couple last minute ones. FC Dallas Danielson,
That's a good
Kevin
one.
Molino to
That's
the
a
crew.
really good one. The Nielsen, Kevin Molino, not super big money, not a DP guy, but yeah, he was supposed to like add something attacking wise to the crew, and then he just couldn't stay healthy. I feel bad about that for Kevin Molino.
And have you ever been called Big J before? Someone called you. It said "nice shirt, Big J." Have you ever been called that?
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah, I can't say it's never happened, but yeah, shout out to whoever shouted out my shirt. St. Louis Football Club. I own a lot of things with the names and logos of dead American soccer teams on it. Unfortunately, it's just, and it's not even like I tried. It wasn't like, hey, let me curate a collection of dead American soccer stuff. It's just when you collect for long enough, teams die because you could actually see St. Louis is over my shoulder right there with the scarf right there. Right? Oh, and that's a. I guess technically Nashville moved up but changed their logo and their look. Anyway, continue.
Have you shipped out any of your collection yet? I know that's part of one of our threads on the Morning Kickaround Discord server,
I have
which you can gain access to with a MK Ultra membership. Have you shipped any of that out?
I have not, and I will happily do that. I have an inventory that is 90% complete, I would say, up
Oh.
over there on the Discord. So if you do want, really just tell me, hey, I want that, Jason, and I will ship it out to you. Give me your address and it will be on its way. I promise.
The generosity of Mr. Davis knows no bounds, it seems. But you can join in the American soccer conversation here on Morning Kickaround. You can click the button to subscribe, and $3.99 become a member. With that, you become an MK Ultra. You get priority commenting on these live videos. You get early access to videos, bonus content, and access to the Discord server, which is hotting up with each and every day, with each and every new member. And then ko-fi.com/morning kickaround. There we have a fundraising goal for a live show. So 3K the goal. And thanks to Ken and some other generous viewers, we are on our way to that. You can find us on social media at mkickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and write us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. Thank you to everyone who has followed on socials and sent us an email. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the subscribers and members thus far. Thank you for getting in on the ground level of this thing that we're building here. So long weekend ahead. I hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable time. It's that time of the year we get to play, was that a gunshot or a firework? Shrug shoulders emoji, but I hope everyone is safe. I was kind of, after spending years in Humboldt Park in Chicago, they go all out, and the safety precautions, not necessarily
Be safe.
top of mind.
Everybody be safe out there. We want everybody coming back with 10 fingers when we talk again on Monday.
Yep. All right. We'll be back Monday. And until then, everybody be safe. Enjoy the 4th. Enjoy your soccer.